What's going on YouTube? This is Marcus again with the Character Corner. Uh, I want to go ahead and talk about the next two characters. One is the main antagonist of the first book, and the other is his wife. Now, before I go any further, I want to specify that I'm planning on doing maybe one or maybe two more character corners for this particular book series, and then I'm going to take a breather. I'm having a hard time finishing the third book. I got about almost 50,000 words in, but writing a book is mentally exhausting. It's a fun process. It's great to put your ideas on paper, but it does take a mental and sometimes physical strain on you because you are trying to utilize every muscle in your head to be able to write a compelling story. So that's going to be the plan for, I'd say, like the next couple weeks or so. But without further ado, let's go to the first picture. Now, this first picture is William Benson. Now, William Benson is the personification of white privilege. I'm not going to mince words about that. He is sadistic, he is arrogant, he is borderline psychopathic. I'll call him more of a sociopath simply because since he was born with a sense of autonomy and privilege, a lot of why he does the things that he does is actually being influenced by the events that surround him. I'm not going to get too deeply into it, but his motivation is to be able to extract the powers that in this universe certain black people were born and inherited it. And so in an attempt to be able to use that power to be able to maximize the effectiveness of spreading white supremacy, he in turn, does things that are just pretty much vile. So he is the adopted father of the hero of the story, Malik, but he changes his name. And I'm going to emphasize a little bit more on the next character because that is more of her character trait more so than his. But what he attempts to do is he attempts to literally abuse and mentally and physically beat the main character so that way his rage will erupt and he can be able to manifest this power. Now, William Benson always knew that this boy had this power, and he systematically did things in order for him to be able to to do these things. But he was always a disappointment in William's eyes, and that's where a lot of the insecurities and the abuse come from with the main characters. So like I said, I'm not going to state too much about his character, but one of the things that I want to talk about with William Benson and why I wrote this character the way that I wrote him is because he, when you look at white supremacists, a lot of times people think of the Ku Klux Klan or, some skinhead or things of that nature, but they never think about the doctor or the lawyer. I saw something on Twitter yesterday which was very, very disturbing, how a young man lost his infant baby with a routine check at the hospital. And so when you see things like that happening to us and people turn a blind eye or they pretend that it's just a coincidence, then that's when it becomes a problem. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to write something that conveys the kind of messages that we as foundational black Americans have always suffered through basically the past half millennia. And so with William, I wanted to write a character in which, even though you can identify his racism and you can identify, the certain tropes, I didn't want him to be like this one-dimensional character. And that's one of the hardest things to do, in my opinion, when it comes to writing, is writing villains that you can somewhat relate to. And here's the reason why I say that. Because oftentimes, we do things out of a desperate need to survive. One of the books that I recently read the ISIS paper, it conveys this message that the reason why white supremacy exists is because of the threat of genetic annihilation. Now, let me just put it to you in context this way. When you have white paint, and if you mix it with any kind of color, especially black, no matter how much white that you put in there, there's always going to be that little tint of black. So when you put it in that type of context, that's actually one of the reasons why they do what they do. And this book masterfully conveys that message. So I will encourage anybody that if they have not read the ISIS papers by Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, then one, what are you doing? And two, to me, in my personal opinion, that book is more vital than the actual living Bible. So getting back to William Benson, the main thing that I wanted to achieve with William Benson is I wanted him to be a imposing figure, but not somebody that is physically intimidating. I think I wrote it in the books to where he's either about the same height as his wife or slightly taller than she is. And yeah, and his wife is just a normal sized woman, which I will get to in just a second. But I do want to conclude with my view on William Benson as I was writing him. One of the things that I wanted to try to convey is I wanted to write a pure and defined distinction between who William Benson shows off in the public and who he is behind closed doors. Because in the public, he's well respected. He was an assistant district attorney in Atlanta. He actually took on several cases for minorities as actually a ploy to hide his racism. And so when he's behind closed doors, he is always belittling his children. He has a daughter. And I will say this, one of the reasons why he feels a certain type of way is because he was never able to have a son to pass down his legacy. He felt like his daughter was not the vessel necessary for him to pass on the ideology that he needed to be able to maintain what he wanted to maintain. So that was one of the things that I wanted to write in terms of William Benson. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to transition to his wife, Helen, pictured here. Now, this is Helen Benson. Now, Helen Benson is what you would call there used to be a term when I was going to church years ago called carnal Christians, which is they are Christians who act holier than thou when they're in the church building. They do all the right things, but when they step outside the church buildings, they act like they have absolutely no representation whatsoever. And so that was one of my motivations of writing this character. She is timid. She loves the garden, and she is very, very passive, and especially when it came to the abuse of Malik. She was also instrumental in changing his name from Malik to Marshall. And one of the reasons why they changed his name is because they felt that Malik was a name of an infidel. Now, if I remember correctly, and there's actually a link somewhere where I am planning on, disclosing that the word Malik is actually has roots in Arabic, in that it actually has links of royalty. So a lot of times, and let me just say this, a lot of times people think that when you have names that personify, the hood and ghetto and things like that, in actuality, those names actually have roots of royalty. But what has happened, especially with, of course, the N-word and whatnot, is that those words were actually deliberately misused and redefined, so then that way white supremacists would actually have you disassociate yourself from your actual lineage. And so that was the reason why they would associate certain names that dealt with being bad or whatnot, and why they wanted you to capitulate into having your Europeanized names. And as a side note, I'm an example of this because my name is spelled Marquess, and I wholeheartedly believe that when I was trying to go for job interviews, a lot of times they would look at my name and determine, oh well, he's a black man because he spells Marcus quote unquote the wrong way. So you would literally get passed up for certain jobs like that. And my sister, she had to use her middle name just so that she can even get opportunities in the past. So getting back to the main issue at hand with Helen, that's one of the reasons why she changed his name. Now, one thing that I want to talk about with Helen when it comes to the issue of Christianity is that I grew up as a Southern Baptist kid. My late grandfather was a deacon of the church, and so we had to, we grew up with kind of a strict religious background. I had to sing in a choir, even though I couldn't sing and got made fun of in church, which, it presents its own problems, but whatever. So, with that being said, when I got older, and when I actually started reading the Bible for myself, I started realizing that there were certain things that were in the Bible that even the churches were not trying to, implement. And so, again, this isn't me trying to tell people what they can and cannot believe, but what I wanted to write is I wanted to write that type of turmoil, and I wanted to write that type of struggle in which all religions, in my personal opinion, have, which is there is, sticking to a moral code to your religion, but then there's also seeing the humanity in somebody else. And the irony of it is that when you talk about Christianity, it's supposed to preach love and acceptance, but whenever you see somebody who personifies something that is different from you, then you want to change it or you want to damn it to hell. And so that was what Helen represented at the beginning. Now, one of the things that I actually enjoy writing with Helen is that she actually has some sort of a character arc, which every character is supposed to have a character arc in some form or fashion. But what makes hers kind of interesting, and I won't spoil everything, but I will say this, is that she too has privilege, obviously, because she is a wife of a former lawyer. So she had the resources to be able to fix whatever predicament that she's in, but she chooses not to. She chooses to fix the predicaments in terms of the damage that she did to the people before, time is up. I'll say that much. And so what I find compelling about that is, even in slavery times, some slave masters would actually put in their wills that they want to free their slaves upon their deaths. And I remember watching Finding Your Roots. I don't remember what celebrity it was, but and I'll have to think about it. But one of the celebrities had a set of ancestors who were slaves, and the slave master actually put it on his will that they were going to free the slaves. And so then the slaves, upon his wife's death, now his wife, the slave master's wife, lived for like another, I'd say, 10, 15, 10, 12 years or so. And when she finally passed away, there was actually a law enacted that actually voided the original will, which was the slaves were supposed to be freed. So those people remained slaves until the end of their lives. And so I say that because with this woman, she wanted to rectify the situations and also rectify the pain that she was complicit in before she left this earth. And that much I will say. So that is one of the things that I wanted to convey with Helen in terms of, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm saying this is how religion should be, but what I will say is this, is that when I started researching for the current book that I'm writing right now, I bought a book on the concepts of Buddha. And one of the things that I find that was interesting is that, one, Buddha isn't really a religion, not in the same sense that people think of it is. It is actually a state of thinking and a state of transitions through understanding, the sources of things and being able to solve your problems. And so, in this particular book, it even talked about a story about how there was a man who was lost in the jungle, and he prayed that that God would come down to deliver him from being lost. And so then, about a few hours later, there was a native that that showed him the way out of the jungle. So then, when the man finally got out of the jungle, he basically cursed God because he said, "I asked God to deliver me out of this forest, but instead a Negro showed up." And what the author said is that what this man failed to realize was that he didn't realize that God did show up. He just showed up in the form of that native that got him out of there. And I thought that that was very, very telling, because a lot of times people want the supernatural things to happen and then occur, and they didn't realize that certain, there is a presence of God in all things. And essentially that is what Buddha is talking about, because one of the things that Buddha talks about is that when you look at a flower, people look at a flower and say, well, it's a flower because of this and that, but they don't look at the other entities that make up that flower, which is the air that it has to breathe from, the ground in which it is rooted from, the water that comes from, like the earth and things of that matter. So in essence, everything around you, is meant, to make you into this complete person. So getting back to Helen, before I end this, Helen is the type of person that she rectifies not only the people that she's hurt, but she also rectifies herself. And she realizes that that she doesn't have to rely on God, so to speak. But in short, she also realizes that God has given her the strength to be able to solve her own problems. So that is it for this Character Corner. This is actually a second recording. I had an original recording and I didn't like it. It felt like it was dry. It wasn't as enthusiastic and it felt rushed. So I wanted to do something that was more lively and more energetic and more kind of straight to the point. So once again, the books are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all these platforms. The new book, The Alakita of the Golden Dragon, that's going to be the third book of the series. And then after that, depending on the reception and whatnot, I might write another book or whatnot. But it's been a long journey. So kind of look out for that. I'll be posting some details of that on my Instagram and my Facebook pretty soon. So with that being said, thanks again for another episode of the Character Corner. Take care. Have a good one, YouTube.